Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so hopefully you're looking at a slide that says 3 online resources for adult learners. The purpose of tonight's program isn't really to teach you strategies like a lot of our tutor development workshops are. It's really to help you navigate some resources that we make available to you for reading for adult learners. 2 of them we have had for a while. The third one is brand new to us, but I don't think they're all that well known. So I wanted to introduce them to you and make sure you knew how to use them. So we believe that these resources are ideally suited to working with Oakland Literacy Council learners because they are developed at lower literacy levels. As you know, any adult learner in Oakland Literacy's program is reading below a 9th grade level. The big difference.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes, Susan, we can hear you. Can you hear us? I'm going to mute you, Susan. The difference is that this content was created for adults, not kids. Sometimes when we look for lower level reading material, we wind up reading kids stuff, and that's not very appealing to adults. They want stuff that's relevant to them or features adults. So this material is all adult centric. Each of these sites makes it pretty easy to zero in on finding a text that is appropriate for your student's level. And they all come with activities that you can build around a reading text to expand vocabulary, to check comprehension, to encourage conversation, even writing. And we know that, reading, the more a student can do, the stronger they're going to become readers. So a lot of these activities are things that your student could do not only with you, but they could do on their own time. So I just want to review some good practices for reading. And that is, you always want to think about a pre-reading activity with your student before you hand them a text and ask them to start reading to you. Pay attention to text elements if they're provided to you. By text elements, I mean a title, a subtitle, images, captions to those images, charts, other things that might be there in the text that you can scan with your student, and they can then make maybe a prediction about what the story is going to be about, or you can activate any knowledge they already have about the topic. What do they know? Maybe what vocabulary can they use already about that topic? And if there is hard vocabulary in there, so you should pre-read this, you can pre-teach that with your student. So they're not going to be stopped right away when they come across that word when they read it. During reading, a strategy that we teach during our tutor training sessions and that I've used to great effect is echo reading. That is where you read a paragraph aloud and your student will read it after you. So they're echoing you. They hear the correct pronunciation of the words. There's a word they don't know. You're bringing it to their attention. All of these sites have audio also with them. So your student could listen to somebody else read it and then read it to themselves. And if you're reading something even longer than a couple paragraphs, you want to stop while you're reading with your student and make sure they understand what they've just read. Can they tell you what just happened in that paragraph, or what is the main point the author is trying to make? And read a piece more than once. The more a student reads that same piece over and over again, the more fluent they're going to be, and the happier they're going to be with how they sound. So after reading, you can do a number of activities. First thing is ask your student to summarize in their own words what the piece was about that they just read. There are graphic organizers that you can find online to help your students sort out the information that they find in a text. And I have another workshop on graphic organizers that you can access, but sometimes students need to take information out of a text, see how it relates to each other before they can then really respond to the information. So it's like a nice scaffold for their comprehension. And then you can ask your student to respond to what's in the text. Perhaps they can express an opinion on the topic, or they could relate an experience that's similar or different to the authors. You can ask them, if they're an ESL student, how would this have been different if it happened in your home country? And you can lead into some speaking skills for them. So tonight, I'm going to spend most of my time showing you 3 different websites that are available to you. The Marshall Leveled Reading Program, News for You, and the newest member of our online resource, the Change Agent. You can see at the bottom of the screen that these resources are available from a 1st grade reading level up through 9th grade. The only one that doesn't go that whole distance is the News for You. That's pretty much between the 3rd and the 6th grade reading level. Okay, so I am going to exit this and I'm going to now kind of show you these different resources. And I'm going to start with the Marshall Reading. I'm going to start with something that I think is at the lowest level and work my way up to the Change Agent, which I think has more sophisticated material. So hopefully we'll capture something that works for all of your students. And I know those of you on the call have a range of learning to your reading levels. So the first is the Marshall Leveled Reading Program. This was actually a crowdsourced project that adult educators around the country worked together on a couple of years ago. They wrote short texts of interest to adults, and then they added different activities. There are actually 16 different levels to these stories. It's organized on the website, though, in 4 different levels, A, B, C, and D. So within each one of these, you have different levels, multiple levels. And if you click on one of the levels, you will see that there are multiple different short reading passages that you can choose from. Most of these are nonfiction pieces. There might be a short story in here as well. And they all have to do with things that would be of interest to adults. So there might be topics on managing money, taking care of one's health, parenting, work issues, running the household kind of issues. And you can kind of let your student pick and choose a topic that might be of interest to them. I'm going to show you one of these. Fall is Here, because it's kind of a timely topic. So I'm going to click on that. And once you open it up, it comes with different activities. I'm going to walk you through those, but I want you to notice up here in the upper right-hand corner is this arrow. If you selected a story and you would like to assign it to your student, you can click on this arrow and you can share a link and email this to your students so that they could go right to that story.
You have it open on YouTube.
So within each one of these reading passages, and this is considered a grade 1 level package, Fall is Here, there is vocabulary practice, And this makes use of a free website called Quizlet. Some of you may be familiar with that. That is online flashcards, and it allows students to practice and play some games with those words. So they can
Orchard.
hear the words spoken. If they tap on the card, they can see the definition. Usually there's about 10 vocabulary words that this the website has thought might be tough for a reader at that level. So they can do the flashcards, and then they can like play a matching game once they have drilled themselves with the flashcards. In this particular matching game, all of the words and definitions appear on a screen, and the student simply drags the word on top of the definition, makes it disappear. No longer existing. The idea is to get rid of all of these. So it's kind of a fun, fun activity to do to learn the vocabulary before they do the reading. So the reading selection is here, and that's going to be online. You can see this is considered first grade. It only has 4 paragraphs. The sentences are very short. There are readers, voice actors who will read this to the student.
Level 1. Fall is here. First reading.
I don't know.
Nights grow longer.
So it's a little slower paced reading. The student can follow along. There is this timer here, which a student could use to check how long it takes them to read the story, and they can do it multiple times. So maybe their fluency will improve. Their time to read that story will get shorter each time they read it. So it's kind of just a way they can check themselves to see how their fluency is improving. There are, I'm going back to the main menu here. So here was the story. They are using Google Docs to provide some comprehension checks that can be, the student can get the score right away. What happens to leaves in the fall? They change colors, days grow shorter. I'm just going to randomly pick some that are probably wrong. And then at the end, they submit the answer. You can view your scores instantly as far as whether they're right or whether they're wrong. And then there are supplemental worksheets available as well that you can use, or you could assign as homework. The vocabulary words are here. And in this case, they're suggesting a closed paragraph. So they're kind of retelling the story, but leaving some fill in the blank spaces where the student can use some of this new vocabulary to retell the story. And then maybe using that vocabulary in new sentences. And down here, we're kind of going beyond the story to talk about different types of foods. If apples can be crisp and sour or mushy, what are some other foods and what do they taste like? And then, at the end, what is my favorite food? So this could turn into a speaking activity with a student, or it could be a writing activity. And here, there's a speaking activity here too. What grows shorter in the fall? And then some more comprehension questions and a writing activity. So a lot that can be built around this topic. And for those of you who are small group leaders, something like this could also work in a small group, right? If you're talking about autumn, it could serve as a springboard If we're reading about autumn, could also talk about, what are some favorite things that you like to do? Have you ever been to an apple orchard? And so on. So there is over 300 stories on this website. As I said, all the way first grade, all the way up through ninth grade. All of them have those elements of vocabulary, link to Quizlet, the story, comprehension check, and suggested supplemental activities. There is a link on the website that if you wanted to find a story that is good for your student, and I say this mostly because if you have a student at the really low end, in level A, it can go from first grade through third grade. Maybe you want to just zero in on those that are at the first grade level. There is a place where you can get the link and just figure out what those level 1 stories are. Likewise, if your student's at the opposite end, maybe you want to pick something that is upper 8th grade level. All right, so let me stop there for a second and ask, has anybody tried using the Marshall Reading website? And if so, how did you use it? Or if you haven't, how might you use this with a student?
I haven't used it, but it's very interesting. I would like to use it more. Yes, this is Denise.
Uh-huh. How would you use it, Denise, do you think, in your tutoring?
Probably, especially the vocabulary. What I'm finding is, they think they know the vocabulary, and because they think they know it, I think they know it, but they really don't. So the vocabulary piece is really nice, and also to bring it back to them, to their own experience with whatever the topic is that we chose. And that's always good because people like to talk about themselves. If they can get the words right in English, there would be a good conversation.
Right. Good. Any other thoughts about how you might use this?
I agree with Denise. I think that would be good to have the story there, but also if it's relevant, like that one on fall, I thought, well, that's good because I tried explaining something today and I wasn't coming through well. So it looks like a nice cadre of different stories that we can link to. So I'm going to use this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's totally free. So you can, you could send a particular story to your student, or you can just give them the link and let them peruse. I know one US born student is just gung-ho to do more reading than she can do outside of her 2 hours with her tutor. She'll just go on to the level that her tutor has told her is appropriate for her, and she will kind of pick and choose her own stories and kind of reports back to her tutor, this is what I learned, or this is the story I read. So she's kind of, comprehending it the next week, but she's doing it completely independently.
How do you change the level? I see the sheet is level 1 here. How do you change it?
So back on the main website, there's 4 different levels here.
Okay.
So broadly grouped, like beginner, B and C would be intermediate, D would be advanced.
Okay.
If you want to be even more specific, I'm going to send you a link to this document and you can scroll down and just choose. Just say you want
I'd like that too. If
Yeah.
that would be helpful to me as well.
Mhm.
That's what I was looking for, an easy way to do it right on that page. Yes.
Yep. Mhm.
So would you
So
say
they have scanned all of these for a Lexile level. Lexile is sort of a view of readability, not only the vocabulary that's used there, but sentence structure, being more complex versus simple. Okay, any other questions about the Marshall?
I
Okay.
I have a
this is
question.
Okay, I see Zenobia. Go ahead, Zenobia.
I think this is more detailed because it has speaking, listening, vocabulary than the news, online news, which I use.
Uh-huh.
So this is a much better one because the stories are nice and short too. Seems like they're short. And they have specific grade levels also, which would be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Particularly if you have a student who's at the lower end or the higher end, this is a much broader range of reading material. It isn't current events though, which is the benefit of News for You, which I'm going to show you in just a minute. So it depends on what your student might be interested in.
Okay.
Was there somebody else who had a question?
Yes, my question is, say for the ESL students, is there any way that you could suggest that we would kind of test to see which level they could start at, or is it just by, having them choose us choosing what we think and then seeing how that goes?
Well, yes. I actually had that in my slide and then I took it out, but I can send that to you. We have
Mhm.
sort of a rough grade level equivalent for our CASA scores. So
Mhm.
you know, as a tutor, because we've told you, like your student might be reading at a high intermediate level.
Right.
That is a 4th or 5th grade reading level.
Okay.
Low intermediate is like 2nd, 3rd grade level. Advanced is middle school, the 6th, 7th, and 8th. So that'll help you target in more precisely. With our US foreign students, we can be even more specific about what level they're at based on their test. Okay, Mimi, it looked like you had a question.
Yeah, I just wondered how to access this. Is it through a website?
It is a website. I'm going to send you guys a handout when we're done here with the links to all of these things. But yes, this is a website. It's totally free to everybody in the country. Like I said, some adult educators worked together around the country to put this together a couple of years ago. Okay, good. Then I am going to move on to the next resource that I wanted to share with you, which is called News for You. And Zenobia mentioned this. This is not free to everybody in the country. Oakland Literacy Council subscribes to it. So we will give you a password to be able to access it. And you can certainly share that password with your student so that they can get onto it as well. And what this is a news weekly website that is produced by an adult education publisher. And every week they take stories from either the Associated Press or the Washington Post newswires, and they rewrite them at a lower level. They're usually between 3rd grade and 6th grade reading level. And every Wednesday, they post on this website 5 or 6 news stories. It's usually a range of a national news story, maybe something from around the world. They will have a human interest story. They might have something about the arts or sports or science. So there's a range of things here. Hopefully something that would interest every student. Some are interested in politics, some are not. They want human interest stories. So I'm going to just show you one of the stories here. This is about food, and it's called The Ukraine War Sinks
Frozen.
British Fish and Chips Shops, to give you an idea of how this is set up. So there always is a photograph. And when I use this, I start by showing the photograph to my student and say, what do you notice about this image? What's going on? In this case, I would ask, do you know what fish and chips are? Since that's kind of a British term. And what this is about Ukraine. What do they know about what's going on in Ukraine? Then they have the story here. You can change the font size to make it bigger or smaller. And they have an audio with a voice actor reading the story. And this is going to be very slow. They have vocabulary words highlighted in blue that might be tough for your student. And if you hover your mouse over it, you can get the definition. So I've done echo reading with these news stories with my students. There are times when I have said, you know, pick a story and read it as homework or listen to it being read to you, and then we're going to talk about it the next week. So you can see it's shorter sentences. It's all been, this is from the Washington Post. So it's legitimate news sources. Adult educators have reviewed it to make sure it's appropriate for adult learners. And with every article, there are some online exercises. So in this case, we'll just go through them there. This is putting a sentence in the correct order. Most families. Well, I don't know what the answer is.
Most are family-owned businesses. Most are,
Are owned by
Owned.
families.
right.
Thank you, Terry.
You're welcome. I happened to catch that line in the article.
So sometimes they're just comprehension. This looks like a lot of putting sentences in order. It will give you some immediate feedback on the screen. You know, if the student is doing this correctly. So there's that. And there always is some other activities that the student can do online. There's a crossword puzzle that kind of pulls all the vocabulary that's used that week in these news stories. There's a word search. And for you, there is a teacher's guide made up each week for the articles that are there. And I'm just going to show you the teacher's guide because it will have comprehension questions. It has suggested discussion questions, again, for getting your student to speak or in conversation classes. I've had amazing discussions with my students using these discussion questions because it's a lot about soliciting their opinions. How are things different from your country? You can learn a lot about your student. And then they'll have different types of activities for each story. Sometimes it's like, here's a multiple choice. Sometimes it's writing, choosing a correct word. You know, here it's expressing your opinion on something. So is the writing activity. As Zenobia said, these articles tend to be a little longer than what you saw in the Marshall reading program. And they are kind of, if your student is below a third grade level, they might struggle with this, with these stories. Of course, you can always, you know, echo read or read to them and take them up a level from where they're at. So this is dynamic. Every Wednesday, there's new material on here. They also have an archive. So if you're looking, you've been talking about a particular topic, let's say voting or whatever, you can go into the archive and search and maybe pull a story from the past out from that. And they also have tips for teachers about how to teach with this, how to do some of those pre-reading strategies, different activities that you can do related to the reading. A lot of students are very interested in current events, but particular ESL learners, when they turn on CNN or their local news channel, they can't follow those speakers talking really quickly or talking over each other in the case of CNN sometimes. So this is the way for them to stay abreast of things that are happening in this country at a level and at a pace that they can handle. All right, any questions about this resource or ideas and how you might use it or experience using it?
No, it looks great.
Laurie, with this program, what would it'd be simply a choice as to whether you would have the student subscribe to this, open this website, and then kind of guide them through where you want them to go with it, or would we open it and then share what we have on our screen with them in using Zoom, as I typically do?
Well, the first time, Vince, I definitely would do it with my student, share my screen and show, how to find the articles and choose those article activities, how to hover over the vocabulary words, start the audio recording. You can kind of teach them how to use it. Like I said, I've done it both ways as part of what I've done during the typical lesson. I've also asked my student to, pick a story that's of interest to her and read it as homework over the weekend, and then come back the next week and tell me what she learned or what the story was about. So it's extra reading practice, and then again, conversation that we can use to start the lesson the next time too.
Laurie, I didn't know we could share this with our student, share the password.
Yes, you can.
Okay. So all right. Okay, because I use this every week, but I mean, we just use it over Zoom.
No,
So
you
that
can
is-
definitely share the password with
Okay.
your student.
Okay.
Yep.
I've used it as a listening exercise because my student wants listening more than other skills. And you can just play it and not turn on the words yet. And then later ask, well, what do you remember hearing?
Yes, and this is nice because the actors, I'll just play it for you. They speak very slowly.
Ukraine war sinks popular British fish and chip shops. The war in Ukraine means there are empty spaces on the shelves of the world's stores.
So there's a nice pause between sentences to give that person who's translating in their head time to catch up before you go on to the next chunk of information.
And it also has that function where it highlights the sentence, so the readers can also follow that and with the sound. In the group, we did that, and they tend to prefer that as well. It's really good in conversation groups.
Thank you, Phyllis. Yeah, it's always a good idea to have something to be a springboard for conversation and discussion. All right, any other questions or comments about that?
I just have one question that I have never used this, and you said that you will send us the link.
Yes.
At the same time, you will send us the password as well, right?
Yes, I'm going to send you a handout that has all of the website addresses and the passwords and sort of a summary of what I'm showing you here.
Looks like this will be very helpful to my student. She is like low intermediate, but she is more interested in current events. That's how sometimes I struggle, because I ask her to listen to radio or we listen to something together. And because when you are listening to radio, their speed always is difficult for her to understand.
Exactly, or watch it, yes. And they don't have the benefit of having anything visual in front of them while they're listening to the radio. So here they've got some words, they've got an image, it's much easier, and the speaker is much slower.
Yes, that would benefit my student definitely.
Okay, good. All right, so the final thing that I wanted to show you is a website called The Change Agent. It is the newest website that Oakland Literacy has started to subscribe to for our learners. The Change Agent is out of New England, and it is a magazine that is published 3 times a year. with the purpose of inspiring learners, adult learners, as well as adult educators to make participation in civic life and social justice part of their learning. So Oakland Literacy Council, as you may know, has had a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative for the last couple of years. And one of the goals of this DEI program is to make sure that we are providing materials to our students where they can see people like them reflected in the materials, and they can read about issues that are of concern to them. And we want students to feel empowered to improve their lot in life. So again, this is something we subscribe to. We will give you the password and you can share the password with your student. I'm going to go ahead and sign in and show you around. So once you are in here, I said it's a magazine that comes out 3 times a year. You'll find that under the issues button here. So the current issue came out last month and it has to do with immigration. The time before it had to do with job retraining, finding new jobs. And what is unique about the change agent is that all of the material is written by adult learners. So your student potentially down the road could even write for a future issue. And the articles are arranged from descriptive stories, opinion pieces, personal experiences, news articles. So there's all kinds of different things in each issue. And while each issue does cover a range of reading levels, I will say in general, when I've looked at it, at the low end, there's fewer first and second grade type stories than there are like upper elementary and middle school issues. So I'm going to show you one of the issues that I had pulled up. This is from February, and it's called Retraining Ourselves, Remaking Our Work. So they have solicited adult learners to write stories on that topic. Then they've kind of organized them into the issue, and they've added some activities. So you'll notice that when we talked at the beginning of this session about pre-reading activities you can do with your student, there's lots of text elements here in the change agent. So you can look at headlines and subheadlines, pictures, a pull quote here, pictures with captions, subheads, to sort of get your student warmed up before they start reading the story. And they'll have pre-reading things to kind of activate a student's prior knowledge and get them to think about what they might be reading before they encounter the text. I'm going to scroll down to this particular story. So this is about an immigrant who lost her job. So she started her own cleaning company. And it's told in first person, and it's pretty long. So there's lots of text elements. At the end of the story, there are questions, some of which are getting at the language that was used. Some of it is getting at what was the author's point and how would the student react to this material, you know, would the students react to the opinion on this piece. Some of the issues will even have the same story at 2 different levels. I would say this is intermediate. In some issues, they may have taken one story and they'll turn it into a very simple beginner story. So it's accessible to students at a different level. This story is available with an audio as well, and you can read it sentence by sentence. as in here,
I lost my restaurant job in March 2020.
or you can click at the top and listen to the whole story. Again, they have pre-reading activities. And at the end, post-reading activities to think about the story. And kind of what I think is a cool use of getting our students comfortable with digital literacy is students are invited to write a comment about what they read. Could be, good for, this woman for creating her own company, or could be, I have my own cleaning company too. This is what my experience is like. It could be anything. It's just giving them an opportunity to type online and to express themselves. So again, they could do, this audio, stop, repeat what they hear to practice listening. And this particular article comes with an additional add-on activity. This whole issue had to do with, of course, retraining yourself for a different job. So one of the additional activities that they offer educators to use with students is to think about, if you want to get a different job, which of course a lot of our immigrants, may have done something in their home country, they're going to do something different here. How do you think about the skills that you have that are transferable? So there's a little worksheet here that you and the student could use together that might help them as they think about what other careers they might like to do. For a lot of the issues that come out 3 times a year, the change agent even puts together a lesson plan. Mimi, if you're still on this call, I pulled this up particularly for you because I know your student is interested in becoming a CNA. And this is a whole lesson plan on being a certified nurse assistant. They have pulled together some different reading resources of people who have this job and what their experience is like, maybe some of the laws that govern, some of the training that's needed. So within the Change Agent website, you have access to these lesson plans too. Each issue throughout the year really is targeting something that, an adult, particularly somebody who's from a marginalized community, maybe a racial minority or ethnic majority or an immigrant, might be facing, and tries to educate them on laws, trends, as well as working on their reading skills. A lot of the issues will have like charts, so you can work on visual literacy as well. Again, I think something like this would work really well in a conversation class, because you could assign a whole issue, say immigration stories. There's a collection of different immigration stories. You could ask your students to choose one person whose story they're going to read, and then they come to the group the next time prepared to share with everybody else about it. All right, so that is the explanation I had for the change agent. Do you guys have any questions about how to use this? Okay. Don't see any questions. So,
Very
yes.
straightforward.
How many articles are in each one of these issues?
I think each issue is about 40 pages.
Okay.
So there's a lot of articles, and sometimes they're poems, sometimes they're charts or surveys. It's a mix of types of texts.
Okay.
All right, well, that concludes sort of my survey of these different resources. Oh, I'm going to show you what I'm going to send you. At least I hope. I still have this up. Oh. Nope. I guess I let it go. Let me see if I can pull it back up. I'm going to share something else here. So I'm going to send you this handout, which will just go through these resources, the link to them, what they contain, the passwords. And then there's kind of an extra guide to figuring out these reading levels. So that will be available to you, and you can feel free to share all the information with your student too. Okay, so I'm going to stop my recording because that is the